Alright, so now we're gonna start with the first type of calculations, the row level calculations, and in this tutorial we're gonna cover the number functions in Tableau. So the main purpose of the number functions in Tableau is to manipulate and transform numerical values, so we can use them on any field with the data type number. And the most important use case for the number functions is to simplify the numbers. So here we have three functions. We have the ceiling, floor, and round in order to round the numbers to simpler form. And as usual, first let's understand the concept behind them, then we're gonna practice in Tableau. So let's go. Alright, so now let's say that we have the following scenario. We have built a view from the subcategories and the sum of sales. Now, if you take a look to those numbers, you can see that they are large numbers with a lot of fractions, a lot of details. We have 3 decimals over here. So those details are gonna make it really hard to read those numbers in the view. Instead of that, we can round those numbers to make it easier to read and hide those small details that are unnecessary here. So if you take the sales, the rounded sales, you can see now we have smaller size in the numbers and we rounded all those fractions, all those decimal numbers. So with that, you can see if you compare the right to the left, it's easier to read, right? So now let's learn how this works. Each decimal number, like for example 1.4, it has always 2 integer neighbors. Think about it like we have a room. It has a ceiling and floor. In this example, the 1.4 has the ceiling of 2 and the floor of 1. And here we might be in a situation where I don't want to deal with those details, with those fractions. I would like to have a whole number, a 2 or a 1. And here exactly we have 2 options. Either we're gonna move it to the ceiling, to the higher number, or we're gonna move it to the floor, to the lower number. So if you decide to use the ceiling function, the number gonna be 2. So what we are doing here is we are rounding up the number to the higher value, to the ceiling. Or we are moving it to the floor, so that means we are rounding down the number. So the floor function gonna round down the 1.4 to 1. And now you might say, you know what, I don't want to decide whether it's gonna go to the ceiling or to the floor. I would like to have it automatic, so it should go to the nearest integer. And here we can use the round function. Let's have the following example. Let's say we are at 1.3. If you use round, we're gonna go to the nearest neighbor. The nearest neighbor gonna be the 1. So the round gonna move the value to 1. But now let's take another value, 1.7. So here the nearest neighbor is not the floor, it is the ceiling. So it's more near to 2. If you use the round function, it's gonna convert it to 2. And now let's say that our value is exactly in the middle, so 1.5. What can happen to the value if I use round? Because it has exactly the same distance to the ceiling and to the floor. And here what can happen is it's gonna be rounded up to the ceiling. We have to have only one value, so 1.5, the round of that's gonna be 2. So as you can see, this is how those 3 functions works. All we think about, it's like a room, you have a ceiling and floor. Alright, so now let's compare the 3 functions side by side. We're gonna start with the ceiling. So the ceiling gonna round up the numbers. The syntax in Tableau gonna look like this: ceiling, and it accepts only one argument, the original number. For example, the ceiling of 1.2 is gonna be 2, ceiling of 1.8 gonna be 2, ceiling of 1.5 gonna be 2. We are always going to the higher number. Let's move to the next one. It's gonna be exactly the opposite. So the floor gonna round down the numbers to a lower value. The syntax here is floor, it accepts as well only one number. The examples are floor 1.2 gonna be 1, 1.8 gonna be 1, and 1.5 gonna be as well 1. We are always going to the lower number. Now let's go to the last one. We have the round. It's gonna round the numbers to the nearest integer. The syntax for that gonna be a little bit different. We have round, then the original number, then we have a decimal. Here it's optional, of course. Here we can decide as well whether we're gonna see, for example, 1 decimal, 2 decimals, and if you leave it empty, it's gonna round it to a whole number. So now let's go to the examples for the same numbers. So if you round 1.2, it's gonna go to the floor. The nearest gonna be 1. If we round 1.8, the nearest gonna be the ceiling, so it's gonna go to the 2. And if we round 1.5, exactly the middle, it's gonna be rounded up to the ceiling, so we have a 2. So that's it. This is how the 3 functions work. Now let's go back to Tableau and start practicing. Alright guys, so back to Tableau. Let's create now a view that we're gonna show the orders with the sales. So we're gonna stay with the small data source. Let's take the order ID, put it on the rows, and let's grab the sales to the view. So as you can see, the sales don't have any fractions, and that's because not that the numbers are rounded, it's just the format is different. So in order to show the real values, we have to change the format. So in order to do that, we're gonna go to the measure sales over here, right click on it and go to the format. Then we're gonna go to the left side, we have here numbers. Let's click on this menu and go to the standard. So once you do that, you can see that we have the raw data as we have it in the data source. So now we want to round those numbers to make it similar to read in the view. In order to do that, we have the three functions, and we're gonna start with the ceiling. So let's close this over here and create a new calculated field. So right click over here in the white space, create calculated field. We're gonna call it sales ceiling. The syntax is really easy, so it starts with the ceiling keyword, and then inside it we have to have our field, the number. So our field is the sales, and as you can see, the calculations is valid. So let's hit OK. And as you can see, we have now the field, the new calculated field in the data source. So let's bring it to the view. Let's go and drag it over here. And as you can see, now we have our new field. Let me just make it a little bit bigger. And all those values are rounded. So let's take the first value. We have 215,88. As we are rounding up, we're going to go to the next higher value, which is 216. Everything is fine. Let's check this over here. So we have 56,11, and as we are rounding up, we're gonna go to the next integer, which is 57. So everything is fine, and the ceiling functions is now working. All right, so next we're gonna go and do exactly the opposite. We're gonna round down the numbers to the floor. So we're gonna go and create a new calculated field, and we're gonna call it sales floor. The syntax is as well really easy. The keyword is floor, and our value gonna be the sales. So that's it. The calculations is valid. Let's click OK. And our new field is already in our data source. Let's grab it to the view. So the first value was 215,88. As we are rounding down to the integer below it, it's gonna be 215. And this value over here, we have it 56,11. As we are going to the floor, it's gonna be 56. So everything is fine. And as you can see, it's exactly the opposite of the ceiling. Alright, so next we're gonna go and round the numbers automatically to the nearest neighbor using the round. So we're gonna go and create the third calculated field. We're gonna call it sales round. And the functions is really easy. So it starts with round, and it accepts two arguments. The first one is a must. It's going to be our number sales. And the second one going to be optional in case we want to decide on the number of decimals. So here we don't want to use it. We're going to leave it as default. We don't need any decimals or fractions. So we're going to leave it as like this, sales, and that's it. So as you can see, the calculation is valid, and we're going to go and hit OK. Now our third calculated field as well in the data pane. Let's just grab it to the view and check the values. So now the first value, 215,88, it is near to the ceiling. That's why the round going to take it to 216. The next one we had 56,11. It's really near the floor. That's why Tableau or the round function going to take it to 56. So as you can see, everything is fine, and the numbers are moving to the nearest neighbor. Alright, so now let's say that we want to see the sales in our view, but having only one decimal, not two decimals like here in our example. So in order to do that, we can round those numbers to only one decimal using the round function. Let's go and create a new calculated field. Let's call it sales rounds 1, and we're going to use as well the same keyword rounds. The number going to be sales, and then we're going to define how many decimals do we want. In this example, we want only one decimal, so we're going to type here 1. So that's it. As you can see, the calculation is valid. Let's click OK. And here we have our new field. Let's bring it to the view. And now you might say, you know what, nothing's changed. We still have everything rounded to a whole number. There's no decimals. Well, that's about the format. So let's go and change that. We're gonna go over here, right click on it, and then let's go to format. And here we're going to bring it to the standard. Once we do that, as you can see, now we have only one decimal value. We don't have two decimal values like the sales, like the original field in our data source. But now you might say, okay, maybe the round as well has decimals. So let's check the format. We're going to go to the round over here and let's click format. And now if we bring it to standard, as you can see, nothing is changing. So that means we don't have really no decimals, we have only a whole number. Alright, so now you might ask me, when do I use ceiling and when do I use floor? Well, there is no rule for that. It really depends on the use case and on the requirement. For example, if I'm building a dashboard for budgeting, to plan a budget, I would go always with the ceiling to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything and I'm not short in the budget at the end. So in this use case, I tend always to use ceiling and never use floor or round. It really depends on the requirement and the use case. So as you can see, those three functions really makes the visualizations easier to read and more simpler. Alright everyone, so far we have learned how to simplify the numbers in Tableau using the three number functions, ceiling, floor and round. And that's it for the first group, the number functions. Next we can learn the string functions in Tableau. And if you like my content and you want to support the channel, then I really appreciate it if you support, like and comment. This really gonna help the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next video. Bye.